anecdote.
We're at a point of no return. You said existential threat.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if we're the typical of conservative America, you and I, the 65 million that voted for Trump, we look around, it's like a synopticon. We've got the NFL, NBA, Silicon Valley, Apple, Google, Facebook. We've got Rockefeller. We've got the Brookings Institution. We have cable TV, not just MSNBC and CNN, but the major networks as well. We have NPR. We have PBS. We have the progressive cultural movement.
Academia.
Music. Academia is where I am. And we're surrounded, and we think that these institutions don't have as much clout as they do have. And then we get shocked every 4 years that the message just surrounds us, and we don't have a mechanism for breaking through to the American people and getting a message. And the irony is the message of free market capitalism, limited government, individual liberty is what they thrive for. In their daily lives, they sometimes vote against their interests because this circular octopus, synopticon, whatever you want to call it, we don't get any. You and I, conservatives, traditionalists, we have safe spaces, if I could use their word, where we retreat to. For them, it's a 24/7 relentless entertainment, education, politics, media, and it's overwhelming.
Do you think, the progressives, they wrote about this, that they basically needed to devour society, all these major institutions. Do you think they've largely succeeded?
I do. I think if you, tomorrow, Mark Levin, go to Stanford and you give a lecture on global warming, I don't think you're going to be able to finish that lecture without being interrupted. I think if I go to Stanford or Harvard or Yale and give a lecture on the value of assimilation, integration, and intermarriage with measured, legal, meritocratic, diverse immigration, I won't be able to finish that lecture. I think if I touch somebody in the shoulder and that person files a sexual harassment suit at me at a major corporation, I'm not going to be given due process. And that's besides the social chaos that we live in. I live in an area that's ground zero of illegal immigration, where the Norteños gang is fighting the M13 gang across the street. I'm talking about refined society. So I don't think due process, free speech, the right redress of grievances exist in major areas of American life: corporate, university, foundational life, media.
So you're saying what you've already seen, and I agree with it, the fundamental transformation of America gradually. Is it picking up speed now?
I think it is. I don't want to be pessimistic in the sense that I really admire you, and I admire people at Fox News. I admire people, some in the Republican Party, really brave voices there are in academia that are saying, I'm going to speak out regardless of the consequences. But the Romans and the Greeks believed that luxus, that's what more authors use, luxury, affluence, leads to non-seriousness. I don't want to use the word decadence, but we are such an affluent, leisured society. So somebody from the inner city can have an iPhone with more computing power than 6 IBM mainframes. A guy across the street can come from Mexico and he can be in a Kia, and that can be a better ride than a Mercedes 30 years ago. And I think that's great, but what we don't get with it is some collective gratitude or some sense of accomplishment. Instead, we get that Kia is not as good as today's Lexus, and therefore the equality result didn't work for me. And that I don't like the lack of gratitude or the trashing of the system or our ancestors that gave us all this system. And maybe it's the universities have created an arrogant and ignorant cadre of youth, but something's gone wrong.
Isn't this the issue about freedom generally? Freedom is a tremendous thing.
Yeah.
But it also gives opportunity for very evil people to use freedom to destroy freedom.
Yeah.
And isn't that what the framers of the Constitution tried to prevent? They were worried about mobocracy. They were worried about autocracy. And so they create this republic. And there's a constant attack at the foundational principles of the republic. President wins the Electoral College. They want to get rid of the Electoral College. The progressives don't like the fact that the Senate is representative of the states, so they get rid of that, and you have direct election of the senators. They want to get rid of other aspects, separation of powers. They keep building up this fourth branch, this administrative branch of government with 2 million people and growing. That's what they do. It isn't that an attack on our foundational principles, liberty?
Yeah, I think it is. I think they understand what the framers were up to. And their model is not a constitutional Rome that went through Europe through the Enlightenment with Montesquieu separate. It's radical Athenian democracy. On any given day, 51% of the population decide what the law is. There is no constitutional protection. You want to kill Socrates on Monday or murder the Melians on Tuesday, you can do it if you have 51%. So it's been steady. I mean, we went from property qualifications, moderate property, to direct election of senators, and there were some arguments for this. And then, as you say, now it's abolishing the Electoral College and enlarging the Supreme Court now, packing it, enlarging the House of Representatives, maybe 1,000 members. Why people in California say, why does Wyoming get 250,000 people get one senator and we 20 million get one? That's not fair. Let's turn the Senate into the House. But the long-term trajectory is government-mandated or sanctioned equality of result. Because they got what they wanted with the civil rights, finally. We had true equality of opportunity. And then they were expecting that everybody would be equal. And human nature being what it is, it's never going to be that way. So they said, or the conservative position is we're not going to be equal, but the poorest person is going to have a pretty good life if he's in a free market economy and a constitutional system. But they say, no, we don't really care what absolute poverty or wealth is. We want everybody to be equal. They would rather have everybody making $20,000 a year than the poor making 50 and somebody making $1 billion. So that's relentless. That's a psychological...
That is a very, very important point that you mentioned. Equality, it's thrown around all the time.
Yeah.
Now, we know what the founders meant by equality. Equality of justice. They didn't mean equality of economics. Of course, that would be absurd because it's an impossibility. And human beings, we pride ourselves on human beings are unique individuals. Human beings are created by God. Human beings are one different from the other. But in the civil society, we argue that the law is the law and everybody should be treated as best as we can, equally in front of a court, in front of the law. But this notion of radical egalitarianism really is a European import.
Yeah. Marx,
Engels, Hegel, Rousseau, which is completely alien to our founders, isn't it?
It is, and it has some precedence in the ancient world. Aristotle, who was a critic of this, said once a man feels he's equal in one aspect, politics, he assumes he can be equal in every other aspect. Plato said the trajectory is that finally the donkeys and the dogs in Athens have to vote, meaning there will be a destruction of criterion. But you're right, it takes up speed in the Enlightenment in Europe, and it bifurcates. And we thought we were saved from it because the Anglo-Scottish tradition was more limited government, very deep skepticism of the cycles of the French Revolution. And the European continental model is a model that progressives choose. And they have a view that human nature is by nature, a Rousseauian view that we're born into chains, that the church, the community, the family, and it's the duty of government to take off those chains and let everybody be liberated, and then they'll naturally be happy, which is sort of our collective nightmare. But we're headed to a radical egalitarian society in aspects that transcend politics, almost every imaginable facet. And I just meant sports, culture, entertainment, movies. That's the message.